Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This was a battle harder fought than any I'd fought in Russia. It was constant hand-to-hand fighting. The English were everywhere. The streets for the most part were narrow, sometimes not more than 15 feet wide, and we fired at each other from only yards away. We fought each other to gain inches, cleaning out only one room after the other. It was absolute hell. And that, of course, was SN Section Commander Alred Ringsdorf.
It was. He springs to life from the pages of history. Achtung, Achtung! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. This is Second World War podcast for all your Second World War needs, which surely include the Battle of Arnhem. Yes, the 80th anniversary is almost upon us, or is upon us now, even as you listen. And James and I are trying to work our way through the maze of contingencies, what-ifs, streets, hedgerows, woodland, dikes and polder that is the Battle of Arnhem, the Market Garden battle, because we're going further than Arnhem. But today we're back in the city itself, aren't we, Jim?
We absolutely are. And I think it's fair to say that we might have mentioned Arnhem and Market Garden in previous episodes once or twice, but never before have we looked at the whole thing in the round in one connected series. And I think it's also fair to say that the sun of history doesn't stand still, does it, Al?
No, it doesn't. How could it?
You know, the bottom line is we know more than we did then.
Yep, we know more than we did then. And in fact, having spent the best part of the last year writing Arnhem Black Tuesday out on September the 12th with the wonderful people at Penguin, I feel that having spent all that time writing about the one day, I still know there's still things to learn, still things to find out, still things to go back to and go, God, yes, of course. And that actually, in trying to learn more about it, I feel like I know less about it. But don't let that get you down, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do what we can to take you through the whole thing. And we're back in Arnhem itself. Our last episode was dealing with, the 82nd Airborne, who find themselves in a sort of reverse situation as to what's happened in Arnhem itself. We're in the confusion and in the half-light and the gloom at the end of the day of D-Day of Market Garden, of the Sunday. The 82nd Airborne have not taken the bridge. They've been scared away by the one fateful machine gunner, one German machine gunner who ensured that the war would not be over by Christmas. I mean, what did you do that for, mate? Honestly.
Oh, come on. Could have been so much easier for everyone.
There are many moments in this story where you do go, oh, what did you do that for? We'd be over by Christmas if you hadn't done that. Don't you know what's at stake, you fools?
A better life for so many other people.
For so many people, so many lives to be lived, indeed.
But it would have deprived me the chance of writing about the end of the war.
That's true. You'd be writing about the end of the war now. This would be it.
Maybe we just... Yeah, and to be fair, I haven't read about it yet, so...
Anyway, so in episode 1, we left you at midnight on the Monday morning. So Frost is at the bridge, which is burning, lighting up the entire town. Yep. It's like daylight.
Yes.
And they can see the enemy trying to skirmish their way in. One para are stuck in Oosterbeek, 1st Parachute Battalion stuck in Oosterbeek, but A Company have already lost 50% of its strength in fighting with Kampfgruppe Kraft. 3 Para Battalion have also stopped in Oosterbeek.
2 Fs.
Yeah, he has 2 Fs, Kraft. He wrote the after-battle report that he sent to Himmler personally.
I did an amazing job. I was brilliant.
Well, there is a lot of that. There's some really interesting stuff in it. Him saying the drop zones, because they're surrounded by woodland, were actually well concealed. So you couldn't tell where the paratroopers were. You just didn't know.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, you didn't know what was going on and where they were. And in that sense, from his point of view, the drop zones and landing zones were really well chosen.
Yeah.
Because he said they brought this element of deception. I mean, the Army Group B report that was written only 5 days after Market Garden doesn't go on about the landing zones and drop zones being too far from the bridge. It basically say, we don't understand why they didn't all land in one go or why they tried to reinforce the second day. And why did they do that further away? Why didn't they just do it on the same drop zone? We don't understand. It's the Army Group B report, which is 5 days later. So it's not ladled with hindsight and decisions and...
No, it's comparatively contemporary.
Yeah, pretty fresh.
I think we'd be asking ourselves exactly the same question, wouldn't we?
Exactly, yeah. So 3 Para, they're stopped in Oosterbeek with Roy Urquhart and Gerald Lathbury in battalion headquarters, camping Fitch's style. The air landing battalions are in place defending the LZs. The British are waiting for the second lift. That's the important thing. The second lift's coming in.
And that's going to come that day.
That morning.
That morning.
10 o'clock in the morning or whatever. Well, it's meant to come first thing in the morning.
Okay.
Right? But the Germans are reorganising, they're reinforcing. Kraft has withdrawn and reorganised. Kampfgruppe Spindler have come down onto the railway line and are blocking the Utrechtsweg now further in towards the town. So the Germans are taking the time that they've been given.
And Spindler's Kampfgruppe, that's more substantial than Kraft's.
Yeah, it's much bigger. And it gets bigger and bigger to the point where he splits it in two. So Kraft withdraws and reorganises overnight. Okay. Spindler is then split into two groups, Kampfgruppe Alvorden and Kampfgruppe Harder. He closes the gap that Frost had got through.
Yeah. So now it's like it's just completely blocked off. But it's a bit Neapolitan, it's Sandwich, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You got the landing zones, then you got a few Germans, then you got Fitch's group.
Yeah.
Then you got more Germans, then you got Frost.
Yeah. It's a bugger's muddle.
There's absolutely no sense of a line or any kind of continuity or anything.
No. But the Germans know the town and they know the choke points and they know what they need to do. And they use the railway line very much as the railway line runs straight down through this entire space.
Yes.
From Amsterdam, it comes down and it remains level and the ground rises and fall around it. So it defines the space really, really well. But it also narrows the gap between the river and the railway line as it comes into the city.
Yes.
And chokes the city.
And there's an embankment, isn't there? There's either got a cutting or an embankment. At some point, either way, there's one or the other.
That's right. And large marshalling yards in the city up behind the area where the fighting happens in the town, around the bottleneck around the St. Elizabeth Hospital.
And the other thing to remember, of course, is that with Arnhem and the area around here is you might think Holland's all flat. But it ain't. No. And in a lot of the accounts of Market Garden, they say that the terrain is a big part of the problems that they're having with communications. But 6th Airborne's post-battle analysis of Overlord is basically, given the way we're dispersed as airborne formations, the way we're split up, you can't rely on the radios. The radios in whatever country, and this is priced into Market Garden because it's 9 miles from the Ginkleheath, say, to the bridge. And the idea is you have these sort of goose egg overlapping areas that the radio sets can cover and that you send messages that way. And in actually how Frost is able to speak to division in the end is via Bombardier Leo Hall, who's with the Foo party, that are part of Frost's party at the bridge, and an officer called Dennis Mumford. And Hall gets his radio working. Right.
By rigging 2 radios up, and he spots that there's an interference and it's a Dutch truck, he thinks, because Jeeps and Kubelwagers, whatever, they transmit an electric frequency that interferes with radios. And so they're all treated so that they won't. So he thinks it's a civilian truck. But he basically jerry-rigs a thing where he's got one aerial from one thing in the roof of the building and all this sort of stuff, sandbags over the radio set itself, and he gets through to 3 Battery, who are back in Oosterbeek, and the radio works perfectly well from the bridge. And then they get netted into division that way. But basically, all the sort of, they brought the wrong crystals stuff.
That's just nonsense.
It's not
That's
right.
That's a red herring. Don't go down that road.
Well, it's filmies. It's filmies for the right. Radios are going to be a problem. But everyone knew the radios are a problem.
Radios are always a problem. It's technology hasn't quite got there yet.
These sets are 2-3 years old in terms of their evolution. So anyway.
So, sorry, just to go back on the radio thing. Do you think it's fair to say that with radio, it gives you little windows of information sometimes when you can get it to work, but don't assume it's going to work 24/7 because it ain't?
Yeah. Exactly right, yeah.
You keep trying and you might just get a little flicker of information, and that's better than not having anything at all.
And also, this is a thing, when radios start rolling out in the desert properly, Monty, at one point, is looking at that. He's worried that what it's going to do is it's going to make junior officers wait to be told what to do. That they're going to wait for a call on the radio. It's going to rob people of their initiative if they become too reliant on the radio. And that's a counterintuitive thing, but quite interesting. But then in this battle, we're talking about people who, as far as they're concerned, are brimful of initiative. So, the people who do bring the wrong crystals are the American air control people who do bring a set that doesn't work. And not who've come to Arnhem. It's not First Airborne Signals Net. And the artillery signals net works pretty well, actually, for the course of the battle. And certainly later in the battle is critical. The artillery radio networking is absolutely critical to the survival of First Airborne.
But anyway, so 1st and 3rd Para have tried to get into town.
That's right.
And they've tried to get down the line route. So they've been diverted onto the line route, which is the southern route. Which is
the southern route that runs kind of along the river.
Yep.
And then under the Oosterbeek, the railway line that comes up from the south with the blown bridge on it, there's an archway that you go under the railway line as the railway line splits and turns. One goes north, turns northeast into the town. Anyway, so they're going in under that bridge.
And 3 Para is also, that's Fitch's lot?
That's Fitch's lot, yeah.
And he's also got his unwelcome guests.
He's got his unwelcome guest. He's got his GOC with him. And this is not great because the previous GOC of 1st Airborne was killed going forward. Hopkinson was killed. Hobby Hopkinson, the sort of glider nut, was killed in Italy the year before, going forward to have a look at what's going on.
Yeah, and runs into a roadblock, doesn't it?
That's right.
Gets slammed by the Fallschirmjäger.
Exactly. No one wants that to happen again. And also, as we know, the day before, the Stadtkommandant, Major General Kussin, runs into 3 Power and is killed in his staff car. It's a perilous business, but it's also, for Roy Urquhart, it's completely in character. His fighting career, he's been a staff officer and he's been a commanding officer of the Malta Brigade. He did the stint in the DCLI and then he went into the Malta Brigade. And the thing is, his command style, and he's got this from fighting in the desert, is to go forward, to find out what's going on. The best thing a commander can do is go forward and get stuck in. So it's not surprising that he's done this, but it's also
deeply unhelpful.
Well, your description of patches of Germans here, Brits there, the radio's providing snippets of information, really.
But you're making yourself a hostage to fortune, aren't you? That's the bottom line.
Yeah, completely. And, there's a bit with, Major Alan Bush, who's 2IC of 3 Power, spots one German with a, as he puts in his account, with a particularly fat arse. And RSM Jack Lord says, I don't think you really want to start a firefight with the GOC present, Careful. So this is the situation at midnight. At the bridge, though, what you've got with Frost's battle group, if you want to call it that, because it's not just 2 Para, you've about maybe 740 men, but estimates vary, is the interesting thing. There's Brigade HQ, so the Brigade Major, Tony Hibbett's there. Mm-hmm. Brigadier isn't with them, because he's with 3 Para. There's sappers from 1st Field Company. There's the RESC personnel, about 40 of them. There's REOC people. There's gunners. There's 4 6-pounders. There's the Foos from 3 Battery, the Light Regiment. There's clerks, cooks.
Yeah, bottle washers.
Lathbury's bodyguard is there, interestingly. It's a proper jumble of people. And they're holding the buildings. There's the factory sector to the east of the bridge, and they're holding some of that. And then there's a large block of tall buildings on the northwestern side of the bridge, and then some houses that are actually cheek by jowl with the bridge, that are right over and overlook the platforms.
And they're in all of those, both sides.
Yeah. And when they've arrived the night before, there are trucks still going over and stuff like that, stuff that's still happening at the bridge. Germans unaware of their presence. And the sappers, they're in the school, which is on the eastern side of the ramp.
Yes, and that building's still there, isn't it?
No, that's gone.
Oh.
You can walk to the site, but that building's gone.
Okay.
If you were to be heading up into Arnhem on the bridge, it would be on your right on the embankment, because the bridge is very tall.
You're heading into Arnhem.
Yeah, exactly. It has these great long embankments on either side of it.
Yeah, and it's important to make clear that Arnhem is only on the north bank. It's not on the south bank.
Yeah. There's nothing there.
You get across the south bank, there's not a lot. There's sort of marshland, and it's all a bit boggy, and the road that leads to Nijmegen, 8 miles away.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Now, the sappers in the school that night under Eric Mackay, they're involved in absolutely savage house-to-house fighting, right? They're right on top of each other. It's the point where Mackay, at one point, a German machine gunner sticks his head through the window, and Mackay puts his pistol in his mouth and blows his head off, right? It's really, really, really intense. And he had told his men to bring extra ammo and grenades stuff because he felt things were going to go wrong. Mackay's no fool. He's 24.
Is he really? He's only 24.
Yeah, I know. He's wiry, tough little man. When you read his account, you sort of think, well, this was written by a man of great years of maturity for his attitude. It's extraordinary. But he's organised these guys, and there's 2 school buildings, and there's one further north, and eventually they have to leave the one on the northern end because it's more exposed and consolidate themselves in the main school building. Now, one of the interesting things about the wounded here is that 16 parachute field ambulance, right, who have come into the town with 1st Parachute Brigade, they have set up as planned at the St. Elizabeth Hospital. So they're actually, when you look at the entire Arnhem plan, the move into the town, they're the bit that goes according to plan, the people who take the hospital. That's teams of surgeons, that's medical orderlies. There's even a dentist who's there because he's an anaesthetist, right? This means that the wounded are being treated in the basements of the houses by the RMO, a guy called Jimmy Logan. They're not being looked after in the proper field hospital situation, which is what the airborne have prided themselves on, the idea that they're going to have an actual surgical field ambulance 60 miles behind enemy lines, which can deal with any problem you might have. But they've been separated. So immediately they're into improvising the situation for the wounded, which becomes gradually, as the fighting continues, becomes a huge issue. So 0400 hours, and everyone knows from the bridge too far, there's the famous push where the Germans come over the bridge from the south and there's a great big battle and it's all very dramatic. But there's actually a push before that, 0400 hours, from the east They come under the ramp of the bridge. The Germans come because they're able to get that close and attack that close because the positions that Frostmen have got aren't picketed that far from the bridge. You know, they're right on top of the bridge. So when we talk about them holding the bridge, they're literally holding the ground directly around it. And there are roadworks at the top of the ramp.
Yes, I think that it's really important to say because when you're watching A Bridge Too Far, you get the impression that the Germans are all coming from the south.
Yeah.
You know, they're coming across the bridge from the south. Well, they might be, but they're also already, the whole point is they're already in the town. They're in the north.
They're in the town.
And they're coming from the north.
And from the east.
So get your protractor or your compass and do a little circle around the bridge on the north end. That's the bit that Frostmen have got. It's like a little bubble around that north bit, isn't it? With the ramp coming down and the underpass and the buildings either side. And
the further out on the outside of that bubble are, the more vulnerable you become.
So they are surrounded, is the bottom line.
They are completely surrounded.
Yeah.
So this first attack is AFEs that come under the, so first of all, they mortar and shell everything. You know, they're doing this thing where they're wheeling the 6-pounders out into the street, nailing the AFE and then wheeling them away again and hiding them, right? And obviously, the issue with that is the gun detachments need to be extremely brave, but also that firing a 6-pounder on a tarmac road is a difficult business.
Why? Because it's just going to recoil away if you're not careful.
Because it skids backwards, and one of the crews is early on is really badly injured because they fire the gun and it sort of flies backwards along the road, right?
Yeah.
And there's little traffic islands they've dug mortar pits in and slit trenches, and there's roadworks at the top of the ramp and building materials. So they build a load of slit trenches at the top of the ramp as well. So they're also not just in the buildings. That's the other thing. They're dug into the surroundings and the grounds. But 0900 hours, you do get the push from the south. And this is the SS Reconnaissance Battalion under this fellow, Graebner.
You come back, because the previous day they'd been there and they pitched up at Nijmegen at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, turned around. Yeah. Thought we'd better get back to Arnhem.
And they've come back.
What they've been doing between 5 p.m. and 0900 is not known and not clear, but here they are.
No. It's scratching their asses. And they do the same thing. They mortar and shell the houses very, very intensely. And then they come over the bridge. And the 6-pounders, what they've done as they've been preparing is they've cut a notch in the bridge because the bridge has a wall along it, like a concrete wall along it that runs along either side of the roadway. And they've cut a notch in it with some armour-piercing rounds so that they can fire straight and level through the notch at whatever's coming along the road. Because otherwise the elevation won't work on the gun. So their positions are super prepared at the bridge, right? And it's a 2-hour fight. So in A Bridge Too Far, it's sort of 5 minutes, and it's German blokes in half-tracks on fire and all that, or in armoured cars on fire.
Yeah, standing up from the waist up, looking like a kind of just saying, snipe me.
Exactly. There's 22 vehicles come across, 12 are destroyed. The Paras described fighting this sort of fire and manoeuvre battle where they leapfrog across up to the road and gun the guys down, all this sort of stuff. And there's Germans in trucks that have got like oil barrels in full of sand as defensive stuff. And Graebner's killed. Freddie Goff is seen in his Recce Squadron Jeep, grinning like a maniac with his Vickers K guns.
Their blood is up, they're absolutely gung-ho, and they're all shouting, Woe Mohammed.
Woe Mohammed, yeah, exactly. The North African battle cry, which of course Germans would say as Woe Mohammed, which is why they've chosen it.
Yes, of course.
You know the Germans can't do Woe Mohammed, right?
No.
But
brilliant. Always use a W, always use a J.
Exactly. And you'll know who the other guy is. But the really important thing about this encounter, and there's been some very interesting writing about this, is they burn through ammunition in this encounter.
Because they think they're about to be relieved. And they think it's all going to be all over.
Exactly. And they've had 16 operations cancelled. These are men who have been selected psychologically. The men in particular, certainly the new breed, have been through psychiatric evaluation as to how aggressive they might be. So they fill their boots and they burn off a load of ammunition. And we don't know, there's no way of knowing how much ammunition actually got to the bridge, how much they have. But what's clear is by the end of the day, Frost has to order the men to stop counter-sniping, right? And the problem with that is that the Germans can then infiltrate, get closer more easily, right? And also, if you're in a mortar pit, you can be harassed now in a way that you weren't earlier if you're counter-sniping, right?
If you've got ammo, you can hold out as long as you want. But if you haven't got ammo, you're stuffed.
All of the officers throughout this go, food, whatever. Water is an issue, but ammunition, without the ammunition, we're done. So that's what's happening in the town. Then back in the village in Oosterbeek, you've got pressure coming from the west.
What are we talking about, 5 miles to the west?
Oh, no, further than that, 7 or 8 miles. There's a little village called Renkum on the river because the road comes down to the river and there's a brickworks there. And B Company from the Border Regiment, they're set up at the brickworks. And overnight, they wake up basically in the morning, they realise that they're surrounded by German soldiers, except they're not soldiers, they're Kriegsmarine men, because this is the other thing about the Arnhem battle, right? It's not just Panzer SS, it's absolutely anybody the Germans can get their hands on who are being pumped into the battlefield in an attempt to disrupt 1st Airborne's efforts to take the bridge. It's everyone and anyone.
Amazing.
Kriegsmarine men, they're not very good at soldiering, so they're stood around in the street with their binoculars and maps discussing what to do next, right? So what happens is B Company figure out that there's some dead ground behind their position. So what they'll do is they'll sneak out through the dead ground, put up an apparent skeleton defense of the brickworks, and then those lads will get out. And it works absolutely perfectly. And when they would get back to the rest of the border regiment, he says, one of the guys says, we're hailed like conquering heroes, but actually we snuck out the back door. It wasn't that groovy. But they leave behind 2 6-pounders. The 2 guns they can't take with them, right? And this is the thing. That's not good. Right?
No.
That's immediately eating into the one thing you definitely...
That's +1, -1.
Exactly. You're eating into the one thing you definitely need, which is those guns, right?
And also giving them to the enemy.
And the enemy's got them now, exactly. But you're shortening your lines, right? The border regiment shortens its lines. Lieutenant Colonel Haddon, who didn't make it on the Sunday, he tries to join the battalion again and comes in another glider, but lands in Holland somewhere else behind enemy lines and is stuck, right?
What happens to him?
He never gets to Arnhem, and he sort of has a sort of, an adventurous life returning to Allied lines over the next few weeks.
Okay, but he gets
as far as I know. Anyway, but they are also, the border regiment people further north, in the morning are strafed by the Luftwaffe. And this is one of the interesting early development on the Monday, is the Luftwaffe are present.
Right.
And these planes come in and the border regiment guys literally go out and wave at them because they think they're the RAF. And then it's, hang on a minute, they're Focke-Wulfs. And they're strafed and several guys are killed and injured by this sudden appearance of the Luftwaffe. And this is a thing that across all the accounts is like, hang on a minute, what are they doing here? I thought we have
superiority.
Superiority. What's going on? And that's on the landing zones, which of course are needed because there's the other lifts to come. So the KOSB, 7th KOSB, they've gone all the way out to the Ginkle Heath, which is 9 miles from Arnhem Bridge, right? It's a vast heath. It's a huge, you can see why you'd pick it if you were, wanted to land a parachute battalion tidily. But oddly, it's away from where they landed the day before. And again, it's as I said at the beginning, it's Army Group B are like, why would you do that? What was the thinking? The right to be mystified. The KOSB, they encountered the Dutch SS on the Ginkle Heath, right? Who were there at the precise moment the second lift should have come in, right? And are surprised by them. And that's what's quite interesting, because there's a suspicion that plans have fallen into German hands. The Germans have captured someone and he's gone, there's a lift coming tomorrow.
And is there any evidence of that?
I don't think so. But,
it's just, they just happen to be there.
But it means, though, that 4th Parachute Brigade don't arrive from England while this fight's going on, they're delayed by fog, in fact. They're not coming yet. And no one knows why, and no one knows when they might arrive. But basically, So it's a good thing, bad thing, because they don't arrive in the middle of a proper battle.
On the other hand, they're late.
But on the other hand, they're late. And they're going to be a half a day late. And time is so of the essence. That's going to have a huge impact on the rest of the battle. At Divisional HQ, Colonel Charles Mackenzie, who's Urquhart's chief of staff, decides, because in Urquhart's absence, he's going to have to give command of the division to Brigadier Hicks. Pip Hicks is the 1st Air Landing Brigade commander, because someone needs to be in charge. So he goes to him and says, right, you're in charge.
And he's the oldest guy around, isn't he? He's like 48.
Yeah. It's his birthday later in the week in the Battle of Arnhem. Poor sod. But basically, what this raises, or what this goes on to raise, is the question of succession within the division.
Yes.
Because Urquhart has disappeared, right? And on embarking for Holland, and I find this is probably his single most harebrained decision, because he knows he's going to go rushing off because that's his style, right? Or he's likely to. He also knows it's an airborne operation, so it's probably going to be confused, right? So what he does is, as he's embarking on the glider, he says to Mackenzie, oh, by the way, in the unlikely event of me going missing or being killed or wounded, this is the order of succession for commanding the division. And the order of succession is Gerald Lathbury first, then Pip Hicks, then Hackett, right? In that order.
Hackett isn't even here yet.
Hackett isn't even here yet. And Lathbury is also missing with the Major General, right? But the problem is, he does this getting into his Horsa that on the Sunday morning.
Yeah, it's not ideal, is it? It's a bit afterthought moment, isn't it?
Yeah, the others don't know. They haven't been informed of this arrangement, right? And there's lots of tensions between all of them, right? Hackett and Urquhart have a terrible row about a walking stick at some point earlier in their career, like where they're fighting over a walking stick. And at one point, Urquhart calls Hackett a broken down cavalryman because Hackett is an armour guy. But Urquhart thinks, well, he doesn't really know. He might not be the best suited guy to using infantry, right? And, Urquhart's an infantryman, Hicks is an infantryman, Lathbury's an infantryman. So he's got this, there is tension between the two of them. But Hicks is now in charge. But Hicks is also the only guy there. So you've got to give it to him, regardless of succession. Hackett, like you say, he isn't even there, and Lathbury's missing. So he's the last man standing. So he's put in charge. And Mackenzie then also says to Hicks, from 1st Air Landing Brigade, can you spare any manpower? Because it looks like 2nd Battalion South Staffords, the other half who are arriving in the second lift on the Monday. Can we send them into the town to help the parachute battalions in the town and their push into the town? So they know at least at divisional headquarters that the push into the town isn't going very well. And he also decides that when 4th Parachute Brigade arrives, 11 Para Battalion from 4th Parachute Brigade will be sent into the town as well, will be taken off Hackett and added to this sort of ad hoc thing in the town. What neither of them decide to do is put someone in charge of the ad hoc thing in the town. They don't appoint an officer to be in charge of it. They don't say, off you go, you're in charge.
Right.
Which I think is quite interesting.
Yep.
It's like they get it half right or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, now the reason half South Staffs are there, and we talked about this in the Nijmegen episode, is the business of the glider allocation. And so Browning's headquarters has gone to Nijmegen, and so the South Staffords are sort of split in two. They just got to wait for everyone else to turn up. The actual problem here is that he hasn't run it past the other brigadiers, so they don't know
Got it.
the order of succession, right? And you've really got to remember that these are gung-ho, ambitious people. They've finally got the operation they've all been dreaming of going on. They're going to change the course of the war. They're going to show proof of airborne concept. They're all going to win their military crosses or whatever. Hackett goes on to end up, running, essentially being the head of the British Army, right? They're incredibly, incredibly pushy and ambitious people. And the idea that he hasn't run this past them, that they don't know, given the circumstances, is very weird, and some authors say this is the worst mistake of Urquhart's in the entire battle. The running off is one thing, but not having the contingency in place for the running off.
It's a bad mistake, and it just feels all a bit casual, doesn't it?
It does.
Why hasn't he thought about this? Why have none of his staff said, sir,
This is him being the airborne landlubber.
Yes, and also the excuse, well, they've already, they hadn't have any time to prepare for this, and it was all last minute. It's like, yeah, but they've been planning it since just after D-Day, various operations. So this is something that you should put in place right from the word go, you'd have thought.
Well, and there ought to be contingency things that are standard to all airborne operations, which is what happens if the boss goes missing. Anyway, we'll take a quick break and we'll return with Mackenzie's other big decision, why he's had to do it, and then the rest of the day. We'll see you in a tick. Welcome back to Weird Ways of Making You Talk. It's Monday, the 18th of September, 1944. 1st Airborne Division, trying to figure out, really, at this stage, what on earth to do, because things aren't going according to plan, basically. I mean, in every way imaginable.
No, the whole thing is a complete mess, isn't it? And,
yeah.
The whole concept of the Schwerpunkt is a really strong one, this idea of concentration of force. And actually, you really, really need it if you're an airborne force, because you need all your rifles together, you need all your limited mortars and 6-pounders and stuff together. And the problem is the whole plan has invoked a split because of this protection of the drop zones for the second lift.
Yeah.
But really, what you've got here is penny packets all over the place.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing you don't ever want to get yourself into, it's a situation where your force is split into penny packets, where they're not mutually supporting, they have no idea what the other penny packet is doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally couldn't be more of a mess, is the truth of the matter. And your OC, the officer commanding, has gone missing. Yeah. There's no kind of proper chain of command as to what happens in those circumstances. Yeah. It's a shower.
Yeah. And the thing is the Germans, they've been very quick in organising themselves because they only have to do one thing. They have the initiative of defence, as it were. They've just got to stop 1st Airborne, get into the bridge. The battle at the bridge itself is a different issue for the Germans because the Germans are having to attack there, and attacking is hard, as we've, that's become this year's sort of touchstone, this year's mantra, right? So where the Germans are having to defend, they have all the advantage because they know the town, they know what they've got to do. They also really do not care about the lives of their men. And one of the really interesting things about the German response is it's profligate in manpower. And they're using literally anyone they can get their hands on. As we said earlier, you've got Kriegsmarine, Dutch SS, you've got a police battalion, you've got all sorts of people being thrown into it. The Panzer SS people are running it, but the people they're using is Uncle Tom Cobley and all.
Yes, because it makes no sense at all to keep attacking the north end of the bridge, because all you got to do is just starve them out.
Kettle them and reduce them.
Just keep firing at them. Just keep firing at them, send mortars over, you don't have to do anything. You don't certainly have to send men across a bridge, do you?
Yeah, well, exactly. And as it goes, what the Germans gradually do, and this happens in the town as well, is they decide, you know what, there's no point engaging infantry. We'll just stand off with our AFVs out of range of the Piats and destroy each house that they're in until they're evicted, essentially.
Yeah, which is a much more sensible proposition.
It's a much more sensible proposition. Anyway, the other decision that Charles Mackenzie makes is to send 2nd Battalion South Staffords into the town.
Sorry, just to remind us, Mackenzie is 2 IC of 3 Para.
No, Mackenzie is Urquhart's chief of staff.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. So he is there. He hasn't gone off with Urquhart.
No. He set up the headquarters, and the headquarters starts on the landing zone where they land, and then they move into the Hartenstein Hotel, which is now the amazing museum there. And at the Hartenstein, in the heart of Oosterbeek at this point, there is very much the atmosphere of a sort of exercise ticking over.
Yes.
Things kind of being tricky problems and all that sort of thing, rather than any real grip on how wonky things have got in the town.
What do we all think about Mackenzie? I mean, what's your take on him? Is he a good bloke? Is he competent?
He strikes me as a good bloke and competent, but he's at the mercy of his boss's decisions.
And these are all incredibly strong characters. I mean, I think it's really important to stress. I mean, Hackett hasn't entered the scene yet.
Yeah.
Gerald Lafbury, I mean, he doesn't suffer fools.
No.
He's got strong opinions.
Yeah.
Hicks is a bit gentler, but, again, these are all people with Hicks less so, but they're men with egos.
Yeah, but Hicks has an MC from the First World War with some action with, where he sees off loads of Germans with his pistol. These are tough people.
They're properly tough people.
And most of the battalion commanders, and Hicks as well as a brigade commander, in the air landing lot, spent the night in Sicily the year before on the wing of a glider, having landed in the sea, and then have to strip off and swim ashore and then fight in their underpants and all this sort of thing.
Yes, because Hicks is with Chatterton, isn't he?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They come and join the SRS and go and join Paddy Main's lot.
Exactly.
Can I join in? This looks fun.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, that Sicily experience is also what has informed the way that the division has come to Arnhem. That we're going to do a daylight landing so we can see what we're doing. We're going to land tidily in some places that suit us so we can fight a neater battle than...
I'll tell you what, the impression you get with 1st Airborne is, and completely not in the same way with 6th Airborne.
Yeah.
You get the impression with 1st Airborne that they've all been allowed to kind of sort of go off and slightly do their own thing without much monitoring, without much checking. I mean, I find the whole fact that they were all in disparate parts of the UK training and not really... There's a sort of lack of joined up thinking. There isn't a sort of collegiate kind of second tier of command. And you don't get the sense that they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, except on the fact that they're all incredibly gung-ho and want to go and kill lots of Nazis in an airborne operation. I mean, that is the unifying factor.
Yeah.
But that is literally it. And the more one gets into this story, the more problematic that seems, because there isn't that kind of unity of purpose, togetherness, sort of shared kind of... singing from the same hymn sheet. That you get from Brigadier James Hill and co. A windy gale with 6th Airborne. It's just missing here, isn't it?
Yeah, but what's peculiar about that, though, is that the cadre that make up, that Gale takes to set 6th Airborne up are all 1st Airborne people. Pearson and Hill and all those kind of people, Pine Coffin, they're all people with experience of North Africa.
But why have Alistair Pearson and Hill gone to 6th Airborne and not...
Because Gale's headhunted them. Gale wants them.
Right, and why has Gale headhunted them?
Because he thinks they're better.
They're more competent, they're more kind of what he wants, and he's moulded that division in a better, more cohesive way.
While Urquhart's been inserted, the man that was expected to get the job down, who's described as the most abrasive officer in the British Army. So you wonder what he must have been like. When Urquhart gets a job down, takes him out to lunch, he says, for 2 hours, Urquhart's accounts are all very sort of genial fellow Urquhart. With 2 fascinating hours as he brains about the command I was about to inherit. But you think if you're gone for lunch with the most abrasive man in the British Army, he's been going, and you need to know this about this fucker. And you know what I mean? Like, it's what that lunch must have been like, and Urquhart's account of it wildly strikes me are probably at odds. But yeah, you're right. Also, one of the other issues is Frost in his memoir says, we didn't see enough of him during the year, really. But you sort of think, well, there's 9 battalions in the division. There's everyone else. There's the artillery, which is effectively, in terms of manpower and strength, in a normal division would be another brigade, but effectively operates as a sort of another brigade in terms of command structures and stuff, right? there's so many disparate people he's got to keep his eye on, right? So he's obviously spread thin, but also Urquhart has a bout of malaria over the summer that comes back. And so he's sick. And so can't be everywhere at once, is ill, and they are all spread all over the country. So it's a very, very, and he goes into it thinking, I'm not mad about the sort of private army stuff that is a part of airborne forces, and they're clannish, and I need to do something about that.
Yeah.
And a lot of their accounts, are kind of like, well, this guy's not one of us. So you've got that going on in the brew as well. The other big problem with that, of course, is everyone's new to airborne warfare. It's only 4 years old. So the idea that there's someone who's been doing it a long time and really knows how it works, it's all new. So I kind of think Urquhart's kind of view of what it might be like is as valid as anyone else's, really. Because after all, no one's as experienced as him in terms of battlefield command anyway, because his time with the Malta Brigade, very successful, and that's a battle group, really, because it's an independent brigade group. So he's used to doing his own thing as well. I mean, anyway, you're right, though.
It's just the more one kind of peels off the layers of the onion, so to speak, the more you start to see a culture and atmosphere within 1st Airborne as a whole, which is not conducive, I would say, to success in an operation.
Yes, like certainly in the upper echelons, because the thing you find is the battalion commanders are all really tremendous.
They're great. Nothing wrong with them.
They're really good. The company commanders are all fantastic.
It's the big decisions.
It's further up that things start to go wrong. They're badly served. Anyway, so the staffs go off into the town and they fight their way in and dodge the Germans on their way into the town with one power. And there's a very famous photograph, men with sort of carts going along a road into Arnhem.
Yes.
And it's actually, like all of the stuff, it's a still from the AFPU footage. 12 minutes of footage. The AFPU guys took 12 minutes of film, and they took some colour film that they were going to film the arrival of Second Army on. They never used the colour film. Then at 1500 hours, the second lift arrives.
At long last. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, 4th Parachute Brigade, again, come in Dakotas, and there's more flak on the way in.
And this is our friend Brigadier Shan Hackett.
Shan Hackett.
And why is he called Shan?
Well, because he's an Irish-Australian. I think he's born in Perth. His father's a Australian newspaper man and like a big figure. He's educated at Geelong. Then he goes to Oxford. He writes a paper about Saladin and desert warfare. He speaks 10 languages or something. He's an incredibly clever man. And he's definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, the cleverest man in 1st Airborne Division, which might not help. Right. He lands and he says there's sunlight coming in through the door of the aircraft. It means he can't quite make out the red or the green light. He waits to jump, so he's nearer his rendezvous over the drop zone. This is a guy who is very, very confident of his abilities, very, very confident of himself, of his command. His officers are they love him, although we have had that mutiny in 11 Para that we talked about in the first episode. They think he's a tremendous fellow.
Well, John Waddy thought he was great.
Yeah. And Geoffrey Powell does too. He's a tidy, trim fellow. And he lands and there's heather burning. And his descriptions, because he's a brilliant writer. That's the other thing about John Hackett. He wrote a really fantastic book called I Was a Stranger, about his experience escaping after the battle, being looked after by Dutch resistance people and being squirreled out. The 4th Parachute Brigade war diary is supplemented by his personal account that he wrote. That's up on the Pegasus archive. That's well worth a look. It's a war diary, but it's written by someone who can write. So it's not just a company engaged Germans. But anyway, he lands, finds his walking stick, his argumentative walking stick, thank God, takes some Germans prisoner, hands them over to the provost. But there's fighting, the KOSB are fighting on the edge of the wood. Some men are killed landing. Gorse is on fire. But the Dutch SS, arrival of a parachute brigade, think, maybe we won't stick around after all, and melt away into the tree line. So the battalion gathers up, and about an hour later, as far as Hackett's concerned, they're in good order, they're in fighting shape, they're ship shape, they're ready to go. But he's not in contact with his sappers, and it's a much more confused and sort of conflicted landing than the day before, because the Germans know what's going on, right? It's obvious. And also, they're further away from the main divisional area, and they're just that bit more arm's length from, the body of the division. It's such a strange decision. Anyway, 11 Para then set off for the town, leave the brigade, and they come down the Utrechtsweg, and then they go down through Oosterbeek, and they're all throwing away the kit they don't need, like their respirators and their, there's a trail, they leave a trail of rubbish behind them, as it's described. And they go down through Oosterbeek, down to where the old church is, and then if you're walking that way towards the river, they turn left and along the Lion route, Acacia Lan, and then they go under the railway and feed themselves up into the area that precedes where the bottleneck is in the town. And they wait that night, and their battalion commander is given his orders and goes forward to try and find the other battalion commanders to decide what to do in the town. So they're committed to fighting in the town and taken off Hackett. With them are the 2 remaining companies of the South Staffords who've arrived in the second lift as well, right? And among them is Major Robert Kane, who's got to Arnhem on his second attempt to get there.
Yeah, this is amazing, isn't it?
On this first attempt, the glider tow rope breaks and the pilot goes, oh, this happened on D-Day as well, right? So they land. I think they land at somewhere like Manston, and he finds another hawser without any seats. They find another defunct glider, take the seats out of that, fit them in the other glider, and set off, persuade someone to take them on the second lift. It's sort of incredible stuff.
So how far behind are they?
He just sort of joins in. You know, they make their own way there.
He's supposed to be on the second lift.
No, he's supposed to have come on the first lift.
Oh,
and he ends up on the second lift.
So he's not in the South Staffs.
No, he's in the South Staffs.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, because there's 2 companies, because 1 company have come already.
2 companies come on Sunday. The remaining 2 come on Monday.
Got it.
He ends up coming on the Monday because of his defunct glider tow rope. He sees all sorts of strange things on the way into the towns, like kids smashing up a picture of Hitler and an old Dutch man who mouths the word Germans and then does the cutthroat gesture, you know. And he bumps into Germans and has a personal firefight with them also. He's such a character. Now, at this point, so they're all going into the town. So this is new, fresh, essentially coherent, kind of 85%, 80, 90% strength formations coming into the town. And the South Staffs, the battalions are bigger. You know, air landing battalions have kind of 840 people in them rather than the smaller parachute battalions.
Right, normal level.
Yeah. Yes, like a normal battalion, because they are effectively normal battalions of light infantry, right? So you've got a load more bayonets and coming into the town, and coherently so, you know, as battalions, forming up properly. So the penny packets that have wasted themselves in the town during the day, like 1 and 3 para, they are now being reinforced properly, right? So it might be that you can bring about a decision in the town. Hackett is livid about losing 11 para. He's not happy that he's been given 7th KOSB as a sort of as a replacement. The thing about 11 para is the reason they've been chosen is their rendezvous is the closest to the town, so they RV form up and go rather than having to just speeds things up. And then KOSB, of course, are on the drop zone anyway because they're defending it. So, you know, in paper that works, but he doesn't like it one bit.
And the KOSB, King's Oath Scottish Borderers, just for those who...
Scottish Borderers, that's right. Yeah, exactly. His other 2 battalions, 10 para and 156, then move on north of the railway line. 156 get into a big fight around the Wolfhazer that night.
Yes.
Again, tangling with crafts people because they're everywhere. The Germans are here, there, and everywhere. And also...
So the Neapolitan sandwich is absolutely in full flow.
Exactly. And because the Germans have armoured cars and stuff, they can pop up, tool about, appear, disappear, and cause all sorts of problems. And also, this shows that one guy with a machine gun, with an proper automatic weapon, can change the course of history, is the thing. And, you know, we talked about the guy in Nijmegen with the, machine gun, stopping 82nd Airborne from going for the bridge as they wriggle through the town that night. This is a similar deal. And 156, they get embroiled in a fight that night. What Hackett's planning to do is do what is in the original Arnhem plan, which is to swing round the north of the town and go to their phase 2 positions. And the idea is that you look at the planned investment of Arnhem by 1st Airborne Division map, the town is sort of divided up into portions that each of the different brigades will hold. And he's decided what he's going to do. He's not going to try pushing into the town. He's going to do what's in the original Market Garden plan for 4th Parachute Brigade, which is to swing over north into the town, not to go into the sort of wedge that everyone else is feeling, so to flank it. But the problem with that is one para on the Sunday afternoon tried that and got stuck, got repulsed and ended up having to go back down to the Lion route and lost a great deal of its strength in the process. It's known that area is problematic.
So it's just a bit too rigid. His plan is too rigid for the evolving situation.
It's very interesting. The situation is dramatically different from the expected one.
He's supposed to be the clever guy.
Yeah. It's dramatically different situation for the one that's been expected. He is late also. Maybe doing that 11 o'clock in the morning after landing at 8 o'clock in the morning would have worked on the day.
But it ain't going to work at 11 o'clock at night.
Well, no, he's talking about doing it tomorrow morning.
Okay, right. So even later.
On Tuesday morning. So at midnight on the Monday in Arnhem.
On the 18th.
On the 18th into the 19th, you have 2 para at the bridge, buildings burning still. And Frost says, last night it was very handy that the bridge lit everything up because the great thing about that is we can see the enemy. So he says, let's set fire to these huts over here so that we have illumination. And in his account, he's very good. He goes, we really need to have bothered because our building caught fire anyway. So, and then they're having to put the fires out. And in the school, the roof of the school catches fire and you have sappers on the roof putting the fires out. And of course, they're silhouetted in the flames and targets for German sniping, which they can't return counter-snipe because they're hanging on to their ammunition. The radio to 3 batteries working, and the brigade HQ are using that to talk to division. So the division know the situation at the bridge. 1 and 3 power in the town, they're out of contact with each other. 11 power are arriving, South Staffords are arriving. But where is General Urquhart?
Yeah.
And at this point, he is hiding in a loft at Zwarteweg 14, which is a street.
What the heck?
It's absolutely amazing. He's in a house opposite the St. Elizabeth Hospital. And the thing about the St. Elizabeth Hospital, which we touched on earlier, with 16 parachute field ambulance, in 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, the Germans capture it and take away the commanding officer of the field ambulance, but say you can carry on using it as a hospital. And it is literally in the middle of the battlefield. The Germans come in at one point and say, we've been fired on from this hospital. It's completely unconscionable. And they do some machine gunning up the corridors and all this sort of thing. And at one point, they put a mortar right behind the building, lobbing bombs right over the building. And no one can do counter-battery fire to that because they don't want to fire on the hospital, right? So the hospital is wildly contested and in the centre of the battlefield in the town. And in the loft of a house, literally on the other side of the street, is Roy Urquhart. And he's there because in the afternoon, and it's quite interesting, it's quite hard to find a proper timing for when this little incident happens. He's got away from Fitch's headquarters. And surely Fitch is thinking, thank God for that, right? He's got away and he's got Lathbury with him.
I'll just push on.
Although actually he sounds like that, Roy Urquhart. We'll just push on.
Yeah, he does. He sounds like this. He's got a rather soft voice. And
come on, Gerald. Come on, let's go.
I'm going to go and take a little bit of a deco.
And he says, basically, Lathbury's having the time of his life, throwing sort of gammon bombs and smoke. And at one point, Lathbury's Sten gun goes off accidentally and he nearly shoots Urquhart, right? So Lathbury's having a negligent discharge from the brigadier. He's having the time of his life, Lathbury. They come into the Lombok estate, which is this estate it's on a grid. So the roads run down it parallel to one another with garden strips up in the middle. The red brick.
It comes down from the railway, doesn't it?
From the railway line, right? And the Germans have got MG42s. By this stage of the war, they've got that rig so that you can use them, like the Vickers guns used to create beaten ground like 2 miles away.
Yeah, so imagine the railway line is running kind of, west to east. The British are coming in from the direction of the west. The Germans are pointing in the north, pointing straight down these roads, which are running kind of north-south. So you've got this grid. So if you want to try and cross it, you're not going to be able to, because the moment anyone crosses it...
You've got to move through the houses, mouse hole through the houses, and go through the houses at the bottom of the estate. If you want to move quickly, you've got to run across these streets from each of the strips of houses down from the railway line.
Which is problematic.
Anyway, Clemenson's with his guys from 3 Para, and Clemenson's in the party that kills Cussin. It's his platoon that kills Cussin. So he's kind of one of these guys who pops up everywhere in the battle. He says, suddenly I saw the GOC and my brigadier running down the road towards me. And I thought, well, what's going on? And Urquhart says, come on, Gerald, we've got to see what's up ahead. And Clemenson says to me, I wouldn't go that way if I were you, basically. Probably not a good idea.
Not my position to say this, but...
Yeah, exactly. And... he runs after them, with them, and there's Taylor, Urquhart's intelligence officer, who's with him. And as they're running across the road, Lathbury is struck in the back by one of these, inevitable machine gun rounds coming down the street, falls to the ground, is paralysed by the blow. They drag him in through the back gardens, these wooden divided fences that divide up the gardens in between the houses at the back. They drag him into there, they go into a house, there's a Dutch family kind of like, oh, God, blimey, right? And they're deciding what to do about him. About what to do about Lathbury, and a German appears at the door, and they all shoot him. And Urquhart goes, "Well, I think I shot him." And Clemenson basically says, "I think we all did, sir. Actually, So Urquhart probably has claimed to be one of the highest-ranking British Army soldiers to actually kill someone in the Second World War, to dispatch anybody." And then they go to the next house, having ditched Lathbury. They then go into the next house, and then they hide in the loft, and they're in there for hours on end. Lathbury looking at Clemenson's enormous moustache and taking a dislike to it. He says, we really ought to break out, chaps. I must get back to headquarters. I must get back to division. And the others go, I think we're not doing that, actually. No, yes. Afraid not. He gets outvoted, right? And then Clemenson goes down and looks out the window, and there is a Stug or something, an armoured fighting vehicle, parked outside the front door of Zwarteweg 14. So they go back into the loft. They basically wait until something comes up. And that's where the GOC is at midnight. As Hackett is deciding what to do with his fresh asset arriving in Arnhem. So the crucial moment, you really, really need someone to be in charge. He's hiding in a loft because he has to. And in lots of ways, by this stage of the battle in the town, there are an awful lot of men who are in individual houses, in rooms here and there, in cellars, in back gardens, scattered all over, because part of the problem is, as they've come into the town, the men of 1st Airborne have also been scattered to the four winds in the fighting by the German response, which is all over the place and is penny packets itself, but it's enough to disrupt, delay, and disperse.
And they've got bigger guns.
Anyway, so the scene is set for Tuesday the 19th, or as I've called it, Black Tuesday.
And that's a big clue in how it develops.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about that in our next episode. Thanks very much for listening. If you want to listen to all these in one go, and you probably will, and your dog will thank you, then go to our Apple channel, podcast channel, and look up We Have Ways of Making You Talk. There's an officer class option, a subscription that means no ads, and also everything's curated into the different subjects and all that sort of stuff. And you can get this series all in one lump, or become a Patreon.
Yeah, and also, don't forget that we now have our YouTube channel, WW2 Walking the Ground.
Yeah.
And depending on what time you listen to this, we may or may not have done our Walking the Ground Arnhem and Market Garden and Nijmegen. But if you're getting to it now, at the moment I'm recording this, then you got it to come. But look out for it anyway, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, look out for Walking the Ground on YouTube. Yeah. Okay, we'll see you for Black Tuesday. Well, for most of you.
Episode 4.
And probably immediately after this, if you're listening that way. Anyway, thanks very much. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Arnhem, Black Tuesday, 24 hours in the Battle of Arnhem. From me, Al Murray. Now, if you're familiar with me and We Have Ways of Making You Talk, you know I do everything I can to crowbar the Battle of Arnhem into every conversation. Well, here it is, the full crowbar. Arnhem, Black Tuesday, out now in hardback, ebook and audio.